On April 18, 1906, San Francisco, California was rocked by an earthquake that has become one of the most famous in history. But how much do you really know about it? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are exploring the facts and stories behind one of the deadliest earthquakes in history. Let's get into it. April 18, 1906, San Francisco, California. Just before dawn, the city was sleeping peacefully, but at 5:12 a.m., the earth tore apart beneath them. In less than a minute, one of America's richest cities was reduced to rubble and fire. San Francisco was a booming city. Banks, theaters, ports, and even homes lined the streets. People thought it was the greatest city on earth, but nobody expected what was coming. At 5:12 a.m. on April 18, 1906, the ground shook violently. Buildings collapsed instantly. Streets cracked open. Water mains burst, cutting off the fire response. People ran screaming through the chaos. They didn't know it yet, but they had survived the biggest earthquake in American history. But the quake wasn't the only killer. Fires erupted across the city, caused by broken gas lines. Flames rose above the smoke-filled streets. People desperately ran for the hills or jumped into the few remaining streetcars to escape the city. But there were almost no working streetlights, and many got lost in the chaos. Others simply stayed put, hoping the shaking would stop. For 3 long days and nights, the fires raged out of control. With no water supply, firefighters were helpless to stop them. They spent their time digging survivors out of the rubble. Instead, they used dynamite to blow up whole blocks of buildings. And still the firestorm raged on. It consumed 500 city blocks before it finally began to weaken. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the rain returned. It fell in torrents over the smoldering ruins of the city. The fires burned out, and the people of San Francisco were left surveying the damage. Over 80,000 people were dead. 28,000 buildings were destroyed, and half the city's population left homeless. They slept in tents on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by ashes and smoke rising above the rubble. Eyewitnesses described the scene, saying, "It was like the end of the world." So where did the earthquake come from, and how did it cause so much destruction? Well, it all has to do with the giant crack in the earth that runs along the west coast of the United States. This crack is known as the San Andreas Fault. It's actually a transform boundary between two of the Earth's tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. The Pacific Plate is moving roughly southwest at 2 inches per year. However, the North American Plate is moving to the northwest at around 1 inch per year. This difference of about 3 inches per year causes a lot of pressure to build up along the fault line. Eventually, the pressure is released suddenly, causing an earthquake. In the case of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the pressure was released with a magnitude of 7.9 on the Richter scale. That's why it's considered one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. But why did the earthquake cause such widespread damage? Well, it's because it struck at such a shallow depth. The earthquake's epicenter was only about 3 miles below the surface. This allowed the energy to be released very quickly and with great force. The shaking lasted for only about a minute, but in that short time, it caused an estimated $3 billion in damage. That's equivalent to over $100 billion today. It also generated a tsunami that was felt as far away as Japan. But despite the massive death toll and destruction, San Francisco was rebuilt and it was better than ever. The city adopted new building codes that made it more resistant to earthquakes. And scientists began serious studies of earthquakes to try to better understand them. Before the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, they were mostly ignored. So let us take a look at how the city was rebuilt and how the lessons learned from the earthquake have helped to save lives since then. The rebuilding of San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake was a monumental task, but it was done quickly and efficiently. Within weeks of the disaster, the city had formed a board of fire underwriters to assess the damage and begin the process of rebuilding. The board worked closely with architects and engineers to develop new building codes that would make San Francisco one of the safest cities in the world. These new codes required buildings to be built with strong materials and to have flexible connections so that they could withstand earthquakes that might happen in the future. But the rebuilding process was not easy. There was a lot of opposition to the new building codes, as many people felt that they were too expensive and would make it difficult for the city to recover economically. However, in the end, the codes were adopted and they have been credited with saving countless lives. One of the most important changes made to the building codes was the introduction of the soft story requirement. This required that buildings have weak stories near the ground level, so that they would be more likely to collapse outwards rather than collapsing inwards onto the upper floors. This change was particularly important in commercial buildings, where people were likely to be working or shopping. It meant that if an earthquake did occur, the people inside the building would have a better chance of escaping through the openings created in the soft stories. Another important change made to the building codes was the introduction of the base isolation concept. This involved placing buildings on rubber or other flexible pads, so that they would be isolated from the ground and less likely to be damaged during an earthquake. While this was not a new idea, it was the first time it had been widely adopted in building codes. The new building codes were not the only thing that helped to make San Francisco more earthquake resistant. After the 1906 earthquake, the city invested heavily in public education about earthquakes and how to respond to them. They also developed a strong emergency response system that could be activated in the event of a major earthquake. These measures proved to be extremely effective in the years that followed. In 1989, a major earthquake struck the nearby city of Loma Prieta. While the earthquake caused billions of dollars in damage and killed dozens of people, it could have been much worse. Thanks to the new building codes and emergency response system, the damage and loss of life were kept to a minimum. In the years since then, San Francisco has continued to improve its earthquake preparedness. In addition to the building codes and emergency response system, the city has also conducted numerous studies to identify buildings that might be particularly vulnerable in an earthquake. They have also developed plans to evacuate these buildings and other high-risk areas in the event of an earthquake. These measures have paid off in a big way. In recent years, San Francisco has been named one of the best cities in the United States for earthquake resilience. As we can see, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake was a terrible tragedy, but it also gave us some valuable lessons about how to rebuild after a disaster and how to prepare for future earthquakes. Thanks to the efforts of the people of San Francisco and the lessons learned from the 1906 earthquake, the city is now one of the safest places in the world to live during an earthquake. So, what do you think? Did you learn something new about the 1906 San Francisco earthquake? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.